Morning, everyone, or I guess afternoon now. Hello, and welcome to the Entrepreneurs Change the World Summer Program. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors, P&G, Kroger, First Financial, Taft, and KMK Law. This would not be possible without them. Today, we will have a 30 minutes of presentation and 30 minutes of Q&A. During that Q&A time, feel free to type your questions in the chat or unmute yourself. A recorded version of today's event will be provided the next day. And we will also send out a quick survey at the end of the event. So please, please, please be on the lookout for that in the chat as well. Thank you all so much for attending. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Glenn Platt to take it away.
Hey everybody, good afternoon. I hope you're all doing well. I'm going to talk to you a bit about gamification, growth hacking, and sustainability as sort of the themes here today. If you've got questions while I'm talking, go ahead and drop them in chat. You can do that, or just say, hey, I got a question, and I'll just jump over there and say, hey, unmute yourself and ask it. I'm pretty flexible with what we're going to do here. So let me share my screen. So give me a second here. Awesome. So let me put the notifications here a little out of the way so I can see when there's chat. Perfect. So like I said, I'm going to talk to you today about gamification and growth. My name is Glenn Platt. I'm a professor at Miami University. I'm in a department called Emerging Technology in Business and Design. It's a long name for a department. We've got a degree in emerging tech and business and design, a degree in digital marketing, a degree also in technology entrepreneurship. If any of you, as you're thinking about colleges, would like to know a little more about our technology entrepreneurship double major, feel free to just get in touch with me. You'll have all my contact information, and I'd be happy to tell you a little more about that. It's a bachelor's degree in entrepreneurship and also in emerging tech. So there's my plug. Let's talk for a bit about exercise. I am the worst at this. I have tried pretty much every exercise plan that you possibly can imagine. Downloaded all the apps. I've signed up for everything. I mean, just to give you a sense of how bad it is, I, like a decade ago, had a heart attack, and I'm fine. But I got an elliptical, and I still never used it, right? Like, I'm just absolutely bad about that. And I want to just sort of gauge for you all where you stand on the exercise story. So here's what I'd like you to do. If you just, whatever's easier for you, you can go to that address there, pollev.com, and then /Glenn Platt, all one word, 762. Or if you just text to the phone number 37607, if you text Glenn Platt 762, the case doesn't matter there. And then it's going to say you've joined, and then you get to pick A, B, C, or D. So let's just take 20 seconds here. Like, let's grab your phone or open another browser window. Tell me how often you exercise. And this is not a lecture about exercising, but it's the example I'm going to talk about here in a minute. Thanks, Dan, for putting that in chat. Now, before, and you can keep doing this here while I'm talking, if you haven't already done it, but before I explain what exercise has to do with this conversation, I just want to sort of foreshadow a bit of where we're going here. What you're seeing here is an example of gamification. People often think about gamification, they hear that word, they think we mean video games. And sometimes that's what we mean, but often that's not what we mean. And so what we're doing here captures a number of different principles of behavior change through gamified experiences. And again, I'm going to explain all this in a minute, but I want you to kind of pay attention to, first of all, that there's some norming here, right? So as people started to do this, right, the first person who did it, I think the first couple people did the "Are you kidding me?" choice, right? And then slowly we started to see it bubble up to 3 to 4 days a week. And what the research shows us is people are more inclined to answer these kinds of questions when they've got some sense of what everybody else is doing. Nobody wants to feel like, they're the weird one, right? They're the total outlier. And so seeing what a distribution of people do is a way to motivate people to do something. In this case, it's to answer these questions. The other cool thing about this, I think, is that you saw these bar charts animate, right? Like it was kind of cool to see that when you pressed, this last person, I think pressed A, that when you hit A, it went from 9% to 11%, that people like seeing that. Now, to see how that plays out in the context of sustainability, I'm going to show you an example here that was an experiment in what's called the the Bottle Bank Arcade. And what they did was they put two different boxes for people to put their recyclable bottles into at different points on a block. And one of them was just a normal bottle recycling thing. And then one of them was this one, which this animated GIF plays way too fast, but you can kind of get a sense of it. Whenever you put a bottle in one of those little holes, the light would light up and then the score above it would go up and you would see, this is a game mechanic called fast feedback, that you get that immediate feedback, right? That's what you just saw a minute ago when you were looking at, your response on how often you exercise. And as it says there rather quickly, this thing was used 100 times in one night. They just did it for one night, and or one full day. This one got used 100 times. The one that didn't have anything over it was used twice. Just sort of evidence that people respond to that, right? They like hearing, and actually, if you can Google this and watch a whole video on it. But it had like arcade noises that it did, right? And it showed and it gave that kind of auditory feedback too, the ching, all that kind of chip tune type of sounds. So why am I talking about exercise? All right, here's what we know. There's a bazillion reasons people don't exercise. I think I probably used every single one of these excuses at some point in time. And a lot of them are sort of legit reasons. But these are things that kind of derail us. And in trying to get people to exercise, what we're really trying to do is to engender behavior change. Now, I'm going to use this phrase a lot today, but here's how it sort of maps into the world that you are going into an entrepreneurial context. Is ultimately we're trying to get people to change what they do or how they do. Maybe it's how they brush their teeth. So for example, we just recently got that auto brush. Have you seen it? That's like you stick it in your mouth and it brushes all your teeth at once. I'm a total early adopter, right? That's a behavior change. You're not using a stick. You're just sticking this kind of thing in your mouth. You're biting into it and it brushes all your teeth. When you have new ideas, new inventions, new products, new services, when you're trying to pursue an entrepreneurial venture, at the end of the day, you're trying to change people's behavior. And changing people's behavior is hard, right? We get very sort of ingrained. Getting people to exercise is hard. What gamification lets you do is sort of find a little wedge into changing people's behavior. And for me, it was purchasing a Peloton. Totally changed my life. I exercise literally every single day, sometimes 2 times a day on it. And for all kinds of reasons here that I'm going to explain, but I want you to understand the magnitude of that, because like even with a heart attack, I didn't exercise, right? That's how powerful the gamification mechanics on Peloton are. And I am quite sure that Peloton has scientists who are behavior change experts, who are psychologists and game designers who built it. It's very intentional. And I believe of all of the examples of gamification that are out there, Peloton is by far the best implementation of gamification I think I've ever seen, just in its comprehensiveness and in its effectiveness. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is. So I've been using this word gamification let's just give a little definition to it. Right. So I always tell my students, like, don't put up slides and read from them. And generally speaking, I don't do that because you should never do that. People should either be looking at you or listening to you. They shouldn't be trying to read at the same time. But you can read this, right? Gamification is about trying to get people to change their behavior. But what it's doing is it's using game mechanics to do so. So game mechanics are kind of game elements. I'll give you an example of one that I'm sure will resonate with all of you. If I said, hey, if you watch 10 of these presentations for the ECTW, you're going to level up and we're going to call you, an entrepreneurial wizard. That's a game mechanic. Leveling up is a game mechanic. It's a bit within a game, that we're familiar with, but that mechanic doesn't necessarily have to happen in a game. So, for example, loyalty cards are a great example of game mechanics. You get a little reward each time, you go to Starbucks, you get another star, and then at some point you can take those stars and you can convert them into free stuff. So those are game mechanics. That's gamification happening for you, not in a game, but rather in your consumption of coffee and caffeine addiction, right? So game mechanics, there are literally, thousands of things that are game mechanics. Some are very specific to a game. These 12 game mechanics are pretty common and actually translate very well into business type contexts. Like fast feedback is the one that we just talked about, right? You voted on something and you saw immediately what happened. Being transparent, setting goals, getting badges for doing things, leveling up, getting points for things, having progress. So as you go through it, your progress is being measured. I don't know, for those of you who have LinkedIn profiles, LinkedIn does this very well. Like it tells you your profile isn't complete and says, do you want to complete your profile? And this sense of completion is what drives you through it. That's a game mechanic. So these are all pretty common game mechanics. It's a good kind of reference page for you as you think about maybe game mechanics you want to do as part of potentially your idea, your startup, your thing. Now, all of these game mechanics and the effectiveness of them is actually grounded in psychology. There's a whole literature in this, and I'm not going to get all professory on you here, but there are these things called behavior change techniques, like goal setting, problem solving. All these things you see in blue here, a bunch of psychology research has all gone through all these, and this is what the shrinks talk about. And what they know is all of these different things actually do change people's behavior. And what I'm going to talk about is how we can connect these scientifically proven behavior change techniques to actual things you can do with your company, with your startup, with your ideas to get people to change their behavior. As I said at the beginning, we're trying to change your behavior to buy a new product, to try a new way of brushing your teeth, right? Those kinds of things. So I just want to give you a sense of the science. If you're into this, go ahead and you can Google that too. I'm going to give you, I think, the easiest way to kind of drill down in it all. So in the Amsterdam Schiphol airport, which actually I was just in about 3 or 4 weeks ago, they did this experiment where they took a little clear sticker of a fly and stuck it at the bottom of a urinal. Okay. And what they found was, they had a really good word for it. They called it spillage, but you can use whatever word you're comfortable with. But for the folks who cleaned the bathroom, they found there was 85% less missing the target. There's another way to think of it. 85% less missing it simply by putting that fly there. And I think you can see why, right? Like when people were using the urinal, the fly became a target. It became like a game, right? This is a really simple example of how people's behavior can be modified with really simple types of game engagement activities, right? This is just a sticker in the bottom of a urinal. This isn't fancy. This isn't digital. It didn't cost $1 million to do. It cost next to nothing. And it made a huge difference in how people behaved in the bathrooms there in the airport. right? That's what we mean by behavior change. And look, this stuff isn't new. In 1896, there was this thing called S&H green stamps, which you have no idea what that is, but Pete is super old, so Pete can tell you what it is, right? Like when he was a kid, his mom would go shopping or dad, and when they would go to the grocery store, along with their receipt, they would get a bunch of these little stamps, and and then they would put the stamps in a book, and then once you filled up the book, you could turn it in for something. Should sound pretty familiar to you. This is basically right what your Kroger card does. It's just being done in the stamp way, and you would lick the stamps and put them in sort of a George Costanza, probably going to kill you way, right?
We fill up drawers full of these things.
Right.
It was the ultimate early game, and like
I remember, like, yeah, my mom, I would always want to lick them and put them in the book. Like that was the fun part. The actual word gamification comes from that book you see there in the middle. That was from the 1980s. If you guys were Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or various versions of those things, right? Badges were around back then. They've been around as long as Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts have been around. Now there are modern badges, and I just want to say for the record, I bought all of these on Amazon this year. These are COVID badges. I'll just let you read a couple of them before I move off this slide. All this stuff has been around forever. Gamification is nothing new, right? We're just trying to harness some new technologies that allow us to do gamified experiences a lot easier. Like, for example, we have a device in our pocket that knows how far we walked today, right? That kind of thing. So today we see gamification in your LinkedIn profile and Kroger card, as I already mentioned, or I'm guessing some of you learned a foreign language by using Duolingo. That's that middle picture there. My son learned German. He placed his freshman year at Miami. He just finished his freshman year. He placed out of the first year of German simply because of what he learned on Duolingo, which is free. And just as an aside, the most brilliant business model you can imagine, right? Duolingo is free because what they do is charge companies for translation, and then they use the best people on the Duolingo app to do the translation that companies have hired them to do. And so whenever you do the app, you're actually, if you're really good at the language, you're helping them make money, so everybody can use the app for free. I love it. It's just an awesome business model. On the right there, we see this is a Chevy Volt. This is one of our electric cars, and all this feedback that we get in our car about how we're driving, all that fast feedback, like the bar chart we did before. More recently, what we see on the left there is actually the only known picture of Amazon's warehouse game. So Amazon in their warehouses now have a game that workers in the warehouse can choose to play if they want to. And I think in this one, two dragons are fighting each other. And the more that you stack on the shelves or send out to get mailed, or I'm not sure what the metric is, but the more you do your job in that warehouse, kind of the more power your dragon gets. And so you can do battle with other people in the warehouse and play this game, but you're not just playing the game, right? The game is actually reflecting what you're supposed to be doing at work and making it fun. To the right there, we see a screenshot from Uber. Uber and Lyft both use extensive gamification to try to get their drivers to take certain behaviors. So in this case, it's like, hey, you're only $6 away to make $40. Are you sure you want to stop driving? Right? This is what's called a ludic loop. It's a type of game mechanic, which you've, I'm sure, seen in various places where it's like, oh, I know you just said you wanted to leave, but if you just did a little more, right? If you just got one more star, you're going to get a free coffee at Starbucks. They do this brilliantly. It's super smart. Retail gamification is a big deal, right? It's a $10 billion industry. And these are the important stats you need to be thinking about as you're building the products that you're thinking about building. That when there is gamification in a retail context, what we see is 40% more customer engagement. People are more actively involved in what you do. They spend more time browsing. And specifically, as we talk about growth hacking, when we are focusing on launching our company, it's all about onboarding, right? It's all about trying to get users, because that metric, I'm sure other people have talked about this already, and we'll talk about it. That metric is incredibly important metric. How many people are actually using your product? And gamification increases retention by 69%. Good question from Aaron, asking what is CAGR? That's a total businessy thing. It means compound annual growth rate. That just means it's growing 24% a year. It's a good way to sort of shorthand that. That's just to make me sound
Aaron,
good.
I didn't know till I was in business school, so it's a good question. Keep trying to de-jargon the gamer here.
Yeah, sometimes I do this just so people know I have a PhD in economics, but
in fact, Glenn, we should open this up with buzzword bingo.
Yeah, there you go.
Just give everybody a scorecard. We did this in business school, and every time they gave an impenetrably dense word or a buzz phrase, we would, have a bingo card. And of course, at the very end, you'd have the phrase that pays. And so if you got bingo, you had to go on the wall and actually use that phrase.
Nice. We should have P&G lead that. They're the masters at the acronyms.
They are jargon meisters.
So in retail, I mentioned loyalty cards. That's a sort of common type of gamification, but there are other types of gamification in retail that we see. Does anyone know what the Konami code is? You could just say yes in chat if you don't. It's a good sort of Easter eggy thing to know. So it's a cheat code. It's a game cheat code from back at the very beginning of video games, way back, which is up, down, down, left, right, and then BA. And if you type those keystrokes, you would get it. It's a cheat code, and a lot of websites now have it as a little hidden Easter egg. If you're on a website or using an app and you use those keys in that order, you get a special thing. I'll just tell those of you, you can do this afterwards. If you say the Konami code to your Amazon Alexa or Google Home or Siri, they will tell you something special. Now, that's a gamification. That's a game mechanic because it's like you have a secret code, right? It's a scarcity thing. It's this idea that something other people don't know. Like Chipotle has a hidden menu. There's certain things you can order at Chipotle that are not on the menu. There's other restaurants that are like that have secret menus. It's not that they don't want to put it on their menu. It's the fact that it's in the secret menu makes people want to do it more, right? So that's an example of retail gamification. Another example is to have visible achievements, people like badges, we were just talking about. Tesla has one of these. So if you refer enough people who buy a Tesla, it's not a lot. I think it's just like one or two. Tesla will send you these wheels for your car, 4 wheels that are a special color. And so whenever you see a car that has those wheels, you know that they were like, a master referral for them, because that's the only way you can get those wheels. It's only for people who do that. Or spin to win. So this is a bit of research. I'm not going to make you read bar charts here, but what it boils down to is that when people were about to check out on a website, if they had an option to spin a wheel that ended up with a discount, or they were just given that discount as a coupon, they bought more when the wheel spinning was there, right? They bought more stuff, they spent more money. Simply, it was the same incentive, but the act of playing the game, spinning the wheel, is what made them want to spend more. And there's a bunch of other examples that I don't have time to go into here, but you're going to get the slide deck. You can read through some of these, but you'll notice a lot of these are kind of growth hacking examples, like the first one, for example, right? They got a conversion rate, which means converting means someone actually kind of buys your stuff or does the thing you want them to do. That 2% of the people converted went up to 14% because of gamification, and their customer acquisition, which again, that's that pillar of growth hacking, went up by 700%. Right? This is the power of gamification. So let me give you a tale of 2 different gamification efforts. Wikipedia wanted to get their users, the page owners, the people who sort of managed, because I don't know if you know this, but the way Wikipedia works is every page has sort of like an editor who controls whether or not to accept the changes that have been submitted by the public. And they were getting a decline in the engagement from those folks. And what they did was they put together a really simple gamification thing, which is the more often that you did that role, the more often you did that, you got these points. And then eventually you would get badges for how much engagement you were doing on the platform. And then your name on Wikipedia would have a little emoji that was a special one just for you for what you did. And it increased the engagement they got from their users by literally hundreds of percent. It was amazingly effective. On the right there is a basketball video game that was made for a sales organization. And the sales organization was told, look, every time you make a sales deal, we're going to call it a layup. And in the game, there'll be a layup. And every time you have a lead for sales, it's going to be called, I don't know basketball, but some other basketball word, right? And it was a huge disaster, massive disaster. Nobody did it. People were super annoyed by it. And I want like that to stick in your mind, because the most important lesson in understanding effective gamification is that you have to begin with motivation. You've got to understand why people are playing the game, right? The reason Wikipedia worked and the sales one didn't is because people wanted to do the Wikipedia thing, right? This was encouraging them, like me, encouraging me to exercise. I wanted to exercise. The sales team, on the other hand, couldn't give a crap about whether or not a basketball goes into the hoop, right? They're going to get paid the same no matter what happens in that game. So it's a little bit different. And so motivation is itself its own science. What I want us to focus on are these 4 principles. They were first identified by Ryan and Deci, and then Dan Pink did a TED Talk and became famous saying it, but he pretty much just ripped them off. So the first thing that motivates people is they want to feel like they're really good at something, right? That's the Wikipedia example. Hey, you are awesomely good at that. You have mastered this. People want recognition for mastery. It's the reason to a large extent, I think people get college degrees. Secondly, people want to feel like they are making their own choices. Thirdly, people want to do things because it matters. Not because they have to, but they want to make a difference. Purpose motivates people. And then lastly, people are motivated by being able to connect with each other, to be part of a community. And so if you can create gamified experiences that capture any of these 4, and ideally as many of them as possible, you're going to build this really sticky, really compelling experience. And you're going to see in a second when I talk about Peloton why that is. So this is an example of a thing called the speed camera lottery. It was in, I think, Norway or some Scandinavian country. Here's how it worked. Whenever you drove past the sign, if you were going under the speed limit, you would get a thumbs up and they would take a picture of your license plate. Whenever you went by the sign and you were speeding, you would get a thumbs down and they would take a picture of your license plate. The people who were speeding were charged a fine for speeding, right? The way we all are here. All that money went into a pool. And then the people who were not speeding went into that pool and one of their names was drawn to win all the money. So if you drove under the speed limit, you went into the lottery and you could win the money from the people who were going over the speed limit. Brilliant. And it cut down on speeding like by something like 30 or 40% on this particular street. People did this because they wanted to, right? Not because they had to, right? I'm going to hopefully give you something that resonates a bit with your experience. Class rank, right? So leaderboards are a great example of gamification. I'm going to show you my Peloton example here shortly, and leaderboards are a big piece of it. So how do you stack next to other people? We all know what leaderboards are, right? Well, your class rank at your high school, that's a leaderboard, right? Are you number 1? Are you number 2? Are you number 3? Now, what makes that different from other leaderboards? What makes that, I would argue, not gamification in the slightest, is because you have to do it. It isn't something you want to do. Your participation in this game is involuntary. And good gamification, and I'm going to say this twice, I'm going to say it twice in a row because it's so important. Good gamification has to be voluntary. If it's not voluntary, it's not a game. It's just someone making you do something. So if your parents say you have to mow the lawn and they're going to pay you to do it, it's not really a motivation for you that you're getting paid. You're doing it because they're telling you you have to do it. And you want to design a gamified experience to capture people's voluntary need or voluntary interest in participating, mastery, autonomy, purpose, community. Those are the reasons. We call this intrinsic motivation. Those are the reasons you want to do it from inside of you, not extrinsic motivation, which is someone's paying you to do it, or someone's going to punish you if you don't do it. So what makes something a game is an important thing for us to keep in mind. I'm going to skip past a couple slides here. You can play with them later, but I've got a handful of slides here talking about different reasons people play games. And people get involved in games for various different reasons. And if you take this quiz here, it's going to tell you whether you're one of these 4 different types of game players. But we're going to kind of move past that to talk specifically about sustainability in gaming here in a second. So what are the traps of gamification? PBL gamification is a huge trap. What PBL stands for is points, badges, and leaderboards. Everybody says, oh, we can gamify this. We can make a game out of it. We're going to give you points for, I don't know, you get points for coming to school on time, right? It's not really a game. And they can make a leaderboard of who's got the most points, but that's not tapping that intrinsic motivation. So there's nothing wrong with points, badges, and leaderboards. In fact, they work very well, but they need to be reflecting this intrinsic motivation. Secondly, things don't have to all be digital. Everyone wants to make digital gamified experiences. And as we saw from the airport urinal example, sometimes you don't need it to be digital. You want to focus on the behavior that you're trying to change, right? Don't think about needing to make it a game. Think more about the behavior and less about making a game. So the example I want to talk about is sustainability and behavior change. And the reason I want to talk about that is because here we have this existential threat to all of us that, the world, the meteor is going to come here, right? And end the world here at some point. And we need to fix this. And everyone agrees we need to fix this, regardless of politics or ideology. There is survey after survey after survey that says we need to do something about this. But the problem is that people don't do things about it, because what they need to do is change their behaviors. And there's a whole bunch of research about environmental behavior that tries to figure out why people do and don't do sustainable activities. And the psychological theory is typically that people act out of self-interest, right? So we shouldn't be putting carbon into the atmosphere, but I like driving fast in my car, right? That's self-interest. People also act on behalf of sort of pro-social perspectives or altruistic perspectives. Now, where I'm interested in it in gamification is starting from there, but moving into what's called behavioral economics. So those guys, Tversky and Kahneman, won the Nobel Prize for their work they did in this. And they were looking at what changes people's behavior. And I'm just going to talk about a couple of these here. One is loss aversion. It turns out if I were to say to you, if you don't turn the air conditioner up by 1 degree this summer, you are going to have to pay $500 more on your electric bill. That is going to be more effective than me saying on the positive side, if you turn it up by 1 degree, we are going to give you a credit of $500 at the end of the year. That people behave stronger when they're trying to avoid this negative outcome. The second thing they talk about is social norms. So there was a hotel that was trying to get people to do that. Hotels have this thing where they say, if you want to save water, don't put your towel on the floor, hang it up, right? When they put a little card on the beds that said 40% of our guests do this, more people did it. That when something is a social norm and you see it as a social norm, you're more likely to do it. A bit like what we talked about at the beginning with the exercise. Then there's scarcity, right? You've only got 10 minutes to do something. There's only one of these left. Actually, that makes people buy things and do things more. So there's all this research about this. And I've got some examples of this. I'm also looking at the clock here, and I'm thinking that we don't necessarily have time for all my videos here. So I'm going to also let you go ahead and watch this video. But there was a power company called O-Power, and they entirely gamified the experience of electric use in your house to try to get you to behave more sustainably. So you would get things like this in the app. Hey, here's how many kilowatt hours you used. These are what your neighbors used, and right, all of them. And then here are the neighbors that are really doing well. You get 2 smiley faces, and look, you're above good. You're great. Bunch of game mechanics going on there and that feedback. And it turned out people actually spent less or used less electricity when OPower implemented this sort of bit of a feedback loop, right? When it comes to gamification and sustainability, there are 2 different paths I want to kind of lay out for you. And I'm talking about gamification and sustainability because I think as you're trying to develop your pitches for the pitch competition, there are business opportunities in this space. There are pitch opportunities in this space. And I want to get you thinking a bit about this. So the first category of gamification and sustainability are what I'm calling learning games. So these are games that teach you about sustainability, and they're fundamentally about that. So I'm gonna just quickly switch to another window here. Hang on. Stop sharing. Start sharing. And I have too many tabs open here. Hold on one second. I don't understand why I'm not seeing it. There we are. So in that slide that you're going to have, there are links to all of these. I'm going to go through them quick to give you a sense of it. But these are games that are kind of games, but they're really teaching tools. I'm actually not a big fan of these kinds of games because they don't feel very voluntary. Like, I think generally speaking, people don't think, oh, I'm going to play this game because it'll be fun. And at the end of the day, a game needs to be voluntary, right? A game needs to be fun. So the United Nations actually created a game here called Reset Earth, which is just a platformer. You're just kind of running and jumping. It is what it is. Back in the day, there was a game called Trash Tycoon that was on Facebook that was also teaching about recycling. There are recycling contests, right? Sustainability contests that folks create. You probably had them at your school, right? Where your school competes against other schools to see who brings in more plastic bottles. This is gamification. There is an app called Super Better, which actually lets you kind of design your own goals and then creates a game to help you get there. WeSpire is a company that they work with companies to create corporate games to reduce carbon emissions.
Hey, Glenn.
Yeah.
Can I just do a quick advertisement to the group?
Please.
This is an area I've been having lots of discussions with Glenn about this. And as you think about your projects for the pitch competition, I would really encourage you to think about this area. I believe it is a wide open, white green space. And I also think these are areas that if you kind of hit the right insight and build on Glenn's principles, these are projects that actually could lure a lot of money or sponsorship, or it could be the types of things that you could side hustle while you're still in high school or in college, since most kids are playing games anyways. But we think this is a massive opportunity. And I suspect, I'll go public saying that if you go down this path, Cincinnati will embrace it with open arms, and there will be no shortage of advisors. Our big companies, just about everyone is talking the talk on sustainability. I think they're really struggling with how to engage audiences. And this is where you, the youth, the future entrepreneurs are in the sweet spot of figuring this out.
Yep, I appreciate the plug there. I couldn't agree more. I think the timing is right for it. So there's a bunch of these. You can click through them. This is one called Climate Drops. It's an app that rewards environmentally friendly behaviors. Jewel Bug is nutritional challenges, but is also, if you scroll down here, there's environmental challenges as well built into this. There's a carpooling app that rewards you for carpooling. There's Recycle Bank, which is points and rewards for recycling. But you get the idea here. These aren't exactly games, but they're using game mechanics to try to change behavior for people to behave more sustainably. So One Small Step, Chronicles of Clean You. And then there's a category, the second category on that slide is simulations. So these are games, but they're environmental simulations. So the idea is you get to make a bunch of settings on the world, and then you see what happens. Does the world, overheat? Do we solve climate change? And the second one of these I have here is one called Climate Interactive. And I'm going to go back to my presentation here and talk about that one just for a second. And the reason I want to talk about that one is because there's a piece of research you can see here with the little hand arrow pointing down. This is part of the abstract of that research if you're curious on reading it. But this game was played by 43,000 people. It's not, well, I said it's not a game, it's a simulation. So that's a type of game. This simulation was played by 43,000 people. They did a study with 2,000 of them across 8 different countries. And what they found was that people who did this simulation knew more about climate change, engaged with more urgency and hope, had more of a desire to learn about environmental sustainability. And what's super interesting is that the gains there were strongest among people who historically were climate change deniers, right? That's amazingly powerful research and results, and helps you understand why this behavior change stuff matters. Now, the second way that you can do this is by thinking about actual games and building environmental lessons into them. So there's a trailer here for a game called Eco, which I love, 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 love. It's like it's like an environmental Minecraft almost. You're building a world, and it's a 3-minute video, so I'm not going to play that this time either because I'm already using more time than I should. Watch this video. It's fascinating. You build this world, but everything you do has pollution from it, right? And the object of the game is a meteor is going to come and destroy the planet, and you've got to build the technology to stop the meteor. But you start from nothing. You start from like mining and chopping down trees, and then you have to build a society. But all of your choices you make have environmental impact to them, and you have to work collaboratively with everybody else, or you can't solve the problem. It's a brilliant game. The Sims have an eco lifestyle a game, sort of a version or an edition of the game. Civilization Civ 6 is all about environmental, sorry, it's my phone dinging, environmental impacts. Final Fantasy 7 has this. And then there are actually games that are a little more kind of environmental and focused that are coming up. If you're a game player, go to Steam and you could check out any of these Grow Home, Far North Ecosystem, Niche, where you're actually doing sort of DNA stuff to try to solve environmental sort of species death and that type of thing. So back to my Peloton. Why does the Peloton work, and what does that give you as an insight for growth? Look, this is what the Peloton screen looks like for those of you who've never been on a Peloton. When you're riding the bike, this is what you see. You get a ton of information there, right? And this guy, this guy is not who I use. He's too scary looking. But someone will be there live or recording, and they're sort of telling you what to do. And on the leaderboard there to the right, you'll see everyone who's in that ride with you. There are 4.4 million people besides me who are on this bike. Anytime I get on it, there's an entire, there's hundreds of people, if not thousands, who are doing the same class that I'm doing. And I get all of this data that's at the bottom there, which I'll talk about in a second. The first mechanic we've already talked about is fast feedback. I get to see how fast I'm pedaling, how much what's resistance is sort of on the pedals. It's immediate feedback as to how I'm doing. Second game mechanic is a leaderboard. We've also already talked about that one. There is a leaderboard there. And on the leaderboard, you can see where you are relative to other people who are actually in the ride right now or who've ever taken that ride. And you can do it that way. What's super cool is the leaderboard is also filtered. So I can look at a leaderboard of old, out of shape guys like me, instead of having to worry about a leaderboard where all these young people are kicking my butt. So that's an interesting game mechanic. So what if your leaderboard was just relative to your relevant community? What if it was just the people in your school, or the people that you're related to, or the people that are in a similar situation, or your neighbors, right? Like the example we saw earlier. Then feeling like you're part of a community. So there are hashtags, people follow each other in there, right? They feel like they're part of a thing. And while you're riding, you can give support and encouragement. So if you touch someone's face who's riding with you, it gives them what's called a high five. It turns out support and encouragement are super important as game mechanics go. So if you're trying to get people to, buy your product, you're trying to give them messages of support and encouragement as they engage with your company all along the way. Hey, thanks for doing this. We really appreciate it. We want to send you this thank you gift. We want to connect you with other people who are doing this, that type of thing. Love the high fives. Now, what's interesting is the high fives are prompted by an algorithm. And I think this is a gamification technique that it's a little on the complex side, but is incredibly smart. They actually suggest people to give high fives to, and they suggest it when it's what's called a milestone. So if you do 10 rides in a row, you see here this 10th ride. Actually, in this case, it's the 10th ride this person took on the bike. They just got it. They're thinking about quitting. They think it's really hard. What Peloton does is it goes to me and other people on the board who it knows are generous with the high fives and says, hey, you should high five this complete stranger to say, hey, great job, man. Your 10th ride. You're awesome. Amazingly powerful behavior change technique there. Self-definition is a behavior change technique. We do things to sort of be able to say who we are. Why do you buy Tom's shoes? Because it publicly says, I am all about giving shoes to people who can't afford them in third world countries, right? So having hashtags and tribes and groups all help self-define who you are. Streaks are an example of a gamification technique. So you've bought one of our products each month for the last 6 months. You're on a 6-month streak. In this case, it's how many days are you riding your bike? But having milestones to acknowledge people for how long they've been engaging with you is an effective game mechanic. Being public about your accomplishment, like the Tesla tires. So what Peloton does is when you do your 100th ride, they send you a t-shirt that only 100th ride people get. And so you can wear this t-shirt. I told my wife, I got a free t-shirt. And she's like, you got a $40 a month t-shirt, buddy. It's a way to show off kind of how far you got. It's public accomplishment. Letting people know their progress. If you've ever taken a quiz or a survey online and you're like, God, when is this thing going to end? And then other ones that show you a bar chart about how far along you are in something, that kind of progress feedback is a game mechanic and is really helpful because people like to know where they are in that process. So in this case, there's like a bar chart at the top of the screen, which lets you know how far into the ride you are. Game mechanic number 9 is to have goals, right? So while you're riding, it says, hey, look, your personal record for a 45-minute ride is 792. You don't need to worry about the numbers. They're thinking of them as points. Right now, you're at 591. So you know what your goals are, you know what your personal record is, and you're trying to beat it. It acknowledges your success as you succeed. It lets you connect personally with things that matter. So there are badges. There's one actually right now for Pride 2021. So if you do a Pride ride, you get the Pride badge, right? This is part of that kind of epic meaning and self-definition. This thing I mentioned earlier, ludic loops, where Uber tries to get you to keep riding, is a technique they use as at the end of your ride. It says, hey, do you want to just do a 5-minute core workout or a 10-minute arm workout? They're trying to get you to go. You can also norm with your peers. I'm going to run through these quick because I know we've got time sort of on our hands here. But that peer norming is reinforced with badges. So these ones with circles say you did a ride that 3 of your friends did. This one means you did a ride that 4 of your friends did. So you kind of know what normal looks like. And in fact, you can ride with your friends. Part of the reason I do Peloton as often as I do is I've got a group, I call them my queens because they're all women, but they're a group of women friends of mine, and we all ride every day, and then we chat with each other on WhatsApp all the time. So while we're going on this, we're chatting on WhatsApp. It's a group thing, right? We do it together. And that's why it matters. There are quests. So creating a quest, hey, if you use our app, this is my new idea. What about a quest that in July, can you hit, 25 days of cycling? That's a quest. It's a challenge. You can pursue that with your tribe and then see how that tribe is doing relative to that quest. Then there's the team responsibility. You can sort of say you want to sign up for things, and then social support, because there's a bazillion social places. Like there's even, if you're traveling, like I don't want to break my streaks. And so when I'm going to a hotel, I use this website, and I will only go to a hotel that has a Peloton, so I don't break my streak when I'm on a business trip. Right? Social support. Are these people gamers? And this is where I want to leave you here. No, when we talk about gamification, we're not talking about gaming. We're talking about using the techniques of gaming. All those things you just saw in Peloton are the same techniques when you play Overwatch or League of Legends or Rocket League or Diner Dash or Candy Crush or Clash of Clans. Like, they're all game techniques, but they're being applied in non-game settings because they're effective ways of getting people to do things. And so don't focus on a game, but rather focus on those game mechanics. It begins with understanding your audience, what matters to them, why did they do it? So if we're talking about sustainability, what is it that matters to this audience you're trying to get to change their behavior? As a short plug, last week was this fabulous conference that Ogilvy puts on called Nudge Stock, Nudge, Nudge Stock. And the whole conference is online on YouTube right now. You can watch it, but it's an entire conference on behavior change, which is really fascinating. And one person was talking about environmental behavior change, and she was talking about this research they did where they asked people how much they thought they were saving the environment by turning their lights off when they left the room, and how much they think they're saving the environment if they were to go on a plant-based diet, things like that. And what they found was that people underestimated the effect of plant-based diets and overestimated the effect of turning your lights off. That turning your lights off basically doesn't do anything, right? It's a drop in the ocean, but a plant-based diet could change the world, right? And so helping people understand how do they make logical choices, having information about the choices that they're making and the world they're living in, this transparency, which is a game mechanic. What are the things I do that impact the environment around me? What do they mean? And what do I want to get out of that? And then how can I make that fun? My other electric car is a Tesla Model 3, which I believe is the best thing I've ever bought in my entire life. And I'm making the world a better place. We got solar panels. We're completely, the car is not using anything from the grid, basically. But you know what? The reason I drive it is because it is so damn fun. It's incredibly fun. It's 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. That's why I do it, right? The Volt, which is also electric, is not nearly as much fun to drive. And so I don't drive it as often. And so think about why people do what they do, right? It's the reason I don't like these kind of half-ass games that are like, they look like games, but they're really trying to teach you a lesson about sustainability. I don't think that's terribly effective. You need to be thinking about what people want to do, this intrinsic motivation. Like, go back to that slide where I said mastery, autonomy, purpose, and community. If you can tap into those, people do things because they want to do those things, not because they feel guilty that, the world's going to end, or their parents told them to be sustainable, or they're getting pressure from, their boss or their church or whatever it is. Tap into that internal motivation, then identify a set of behavior change techniques you're trying to engender from them, and translate those into a gamified experience, which again doesn't need to be a game, right? That's how you get started. I know it's an hour and I've left you literally no time for questions here. But if anyone's got any kind of quick questions, feel free to unmute and jump in. If not, I'll send you'll have my contact information. Feel free to get in touch with me directly. Thanks.
Glenn's always accessible. This conversation is just beginning. Quick questions, reactions.
I had one question. So first of all, thank you, Mr. Platt, for your words. I'm very inspired in terms of gamification. What I was wondering was, what question should a brand or company ask itself when in the initial stages of gamification?
Yeah, I think in the initial stages, you've got to kind of identify the goal that you have from a corporate perspective and understand your customer to understand why they are using your product or service, right? Those are like building blocks.
Right.
You can't kind of go beyond those and start working without having those behind you. So, for example, if you're North Face, right, your sustainable perspective as a business is very different than, if you are BP oil, right? So you've got to kind of identify, look, as a company, and I know I'm focusing on sustainability, but whatever your goal is, what are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying to get people to do? And then understanding our audience, like what matters to them is saving money, or what matters to them is being acknowledged, or what matters to them is helping their family, like knowing what matters to them. And then you've got kind of the pieces to start building a gamified experience, because you can tap into that intrinsic motivation.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
It's a good question. I know you're all feeling pressure because it's like there's only 1 minute left here, but that's okay. This is what it's like when I teach, by the way. I'm in front of a whole classroom and I'm like, any questions? And it's like Bueller, nothing, crickets. So if you have questions, or if you have an idea that you're kicking around for your pitch competition and you want to run it past me, just reach out. I'm happy to jump on a Zoom with you and talk about it. As Pete said, I think this is an incredible area of opportunity, sustainability. I think gamification just in general is the future, honestly. Like, I know everyone thinks that, right? When you have a hammer, everything's a nail. But as your generation becomes, not even your generation, really mine is the first generation, and the generations behind me, as they become the people with all the money, we're going to see business opportunities that leverage the language we grew up with. I grew up with the language of games. When you say level up, when you say badge, when you say leaderboard, when you say, here's the rewards, like that is, you're speaking my language. This is how I grew up. This is what I speak. This is the country I live in. I live in the country of games. And you do that even more. And so as you become part of the economy has to be built to speak that language, right? And that's the business opportunity here. You need to speak this language to be able to tap into your market. And the sustainability piece, to Pete's point, right now, people are just throwing a ton of money at sustainability. Because the world's on fire, right? Like we were just talking moments ago with your host, who is, what temperature is it there?
It was 103 yesterday.
There you go. That's not normal, right? So the world's on fire. We got to do something about it. And that means that there's an urgency to it, right? It's in some sense an easier business pitch, because that's what people are trying to solve.
So I think a key message, there's a huge amount of momentum here, definitely on green meets gaming, but more broadly, and think about this, even beyond your pitch competitions, we are really trying to figure out how to build on Glenn and Miami's success as a world-renowned gamification center to really turn that into a cornerstone of our innovation economy. And all of you are close to this world, and our ears are open to your thoughts and ideas. We're thinking through a lot of things. I'm thinking about launching, gamification Saturdays at Union Hall with big prizes from big companies, or going deeper on what Glenn described. But, think about that. I'm sure you're all trying to figure out hooks to stay engaged even beyond this program. Just know this is a big obsession of ours, but it's also an area where we're very humble, because we know that you probably intuitively know a lot more about this than we do. So we look to co-create together. Thanks so much for participating, Glenn. Thank you. Every time I listen to you, you inspire me. I'm ready to go start a gaming company.
So let's turn it over to Abby.
So like Pete said, thank you so much, Glenn, for your presentation today. It was fantastic. And as a graduate of Xavier, I can say it was definitely something that I've never really heard before, never really touched on. So it was very insightful. And thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your day today to join us.
I feel like I need to say that's why all of you need to come to Miami University and not Xavier. All right. We are so much better than them. Oh my God. So.
Just don't tell Professor Haller in that. Like I said, all sessions recordings can be found on your schedule. Students, we love hearing your feedback. I spammed it a couple times in the chat, but please be sure to fill out that survey. We really appreciate all your feedback, and it only takes a few minutes or even a few seconds if you're quick. Please join us next Thursday at noon for listening, trend watching, demand sensing, key basics every entrepreneur should know about listening to signals, whether those are traditional research methods or even social media, to inform hypotheses and ideas with Elisa Smith and Kathy Cummings. Thank you again, everyone, for attending today.
Abby, this Thursday.
This Thursday.
2 days.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,